Hello, and welcome to Adventures in Messaging. I'm Emma Stratton, and today I'm super excited to be joined by Ajit Ghuman, Head of Product Marketing at Narvar. Welcome, Ajit. So good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Emma.
So, I am a writer. And as a writer, I'm always impressed by people who write books. And word on the street is that you have got your first book coming out next month. Tell us about it.
Yes. So my book is called Price to Scale. It's really my pandemic project. I didn't really have too many hobbies, so I wanted to be productive. So, it's taken a little while, but yes, it's going to come out in February. I'm done with 55,000 words or so. It's really for a book for product marketers and product managers who are trying to do pricing for the first time and really not finding like a dummies guide, right? So it's my attempt at creating a dummies guide to pricing for PMs and PMMs.
That is awesome. What a great pandemic project. Good for you. Super impressed. So, Ajit, one thing I really like about you is that we share a lot of the same views about messaging. And I also love that you have some pretty strong beliefs about messaging. So, tell me, what is kind of the most controversial belief you have when it comes to messaging?
Yeah, Silicon Valley is a product focused place. People love their products. They fall in love with their own products. The problem is once you're a marketer, you see things really differently. And what I've noticed is that the product has very little bearing on the success of a company. And it's really all in the minds of the buyer, right? So in that sense, they really don't care about the product. They care about what it's going to do for them. And they care about, do they feel strongly about it, right? So in that sense, my controversial take is no one cares about your product, to be honest.
I know, harsh truth, right? And, it reminds me of this really famous quote by Jack Trout, who is like the granddaddy of positioning, who said, better products don't win, better perceptions win.
Totally. Yeah.
The truth will not kind of get out unless it has some help along the way. So what you're saying is, can messaging sell a bad product?
I think if the product just doesn't work, it can't help. But there are a lot of, on the spectrum of good to great products, there are a lot of decent products who may not have the best UI, who may do a limited function of use cases. And I've seen even those companies IPO. I won't name names, but there are some very big companies with really mediocre products, and even mediocre products can have multi-billion-dollar valuations with the right sales process, with the right messaging. So not bad, but you can have a good shot even if you have a decent product, and you don't have to have the best one in the market.
Yeah, as long as you have awesome messaging.
Yep.
And so tell me then, what would you say is the secret to great messaging?
Yeah. So when at least when I grew up and when I was in school, they used to teach these three things: logos, ethos, and pathos about messaging. And pathos is the one that ends up driving most of the discussions and urgency, which is the emotional component of messaging. So for me, I look at it the way I do my messaging is I try to find a nerve and hit a nerve with the prospect. There is something that's the root of why they're having the discussion. There is something bugging them. Either they're spending a lot of time on one solution. There is some, maybe they have pressure from their bosses to solve something really fast. So it's that insight that really helps to position and set the context for the conversation. And as much as we like to think that our ROI calculators will do the job of convincing customers, in a lot of realistic scenarios, that's really a rationalization over an emotional decision that's already been made.
I love that. I really love what you're saying, because what you're talking about, what's striking a nerve with a prospect, we're really talking about motivation and what really drives them. So how do you find these insights? Like, how do you find what really strikes a nerve with your audience?
So I think that's really what the core of marketing is to me, is really understanding the customer in depth, like walking in their shoes, talking to them, and really understanding their day job and what frustrates your prospects. specifically your champion, not just the economic buyer, because the champion is the person who's going to move along your opportunity. So I like to, when I'm doing messaging, I like to talk to 10 to, if it's a new product, 10 to 20 customers, and understand the problem space, not the, the specific feature, but just what challenges they're facing. And then I'll start to hear patterns repeating. And then there may be some industry context that goes along with it, right? So one example is all companies are saying, hey, we are giving you AI driven software, AI driven this and that. But when you talk to the prospect, they will never say, hey, I'm sleeping and losing my sleep over AI, right? So that just tells you how backward messaging is being created. So anyway.
I swear, Ajit, you are like my long lost brother. I did a post once that says, no one wakes up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat saying, I don't have enough AI in my life. Right? It's just they don't. And yet people message it as if that is the case, and it's
Right,
not. So
right.
I love that. So let's talk something more tactical here. Say, you're a product marketer and you're trying to create a strong messaging strategy for your company. What is the biggest challenge that they're facing, and how can, they help solve it from your
Yeah,
perspective?
yeah. So in my experience of having done product marketing at a few different value firms, actually the biggest challenge is not really coming up with the right messaging or what you may think is the right messaging. It's that there is a lot of internal stakeholders. There are the customer success heads, there is the head of marketing, there is the CEO, the president, and so on. Everybody has a very strong take. And especially, if someone's founded the company, they're going to have a very, very strong take. And the ability to get their voices heard and reflect that in the messaging, I think, is the most challenging, because very often we may think as marketers that we have the right messaging, but if the CEO has to be the torch bearer of the company's positioning and messaging, they have to go on events, they have to talk about this in webinars, and they keep switching back to their muscle memory of what they used to say before, it's not going to fly. And I've seen that happen many times, right? A very talented CMO will come and say, okay, this is our new messaging, all the documentation is created, but the executive team is just saying something totally different the whole day. And so getting them on board, I feel, it takes the longest time and it's the hardest.
How do you get the C-suite on board? How do you rally different department heads around a
Right.
common message?
So the thing I like to do before even starting a project is making sure everybody feels heard, and there is a process that they feel is somewhat democratic, and it takes away this whole notion of the CEO having the most power to drive this, right? So you create more of this design thinking sort of process where we say, hey, we're exploring all opportunities, no idea is a bad idea, we're going to collect everything and make sure you're heard, right? And then you show them that this is going to be the process by which you arrive at it. Most often they will receive it well when they've been involved in the process, they know how it's come together, and they know the reason, the logic by which you've put it together, right? I think always it's a little counterintuitive because marketing is about the customer. However, in this case, you can say that the CEO or the executive team is also a customer. You kind of have to hear them as well.
Yeah, it's realistic because you touched on this before. If people don't feel naturally bought in to the messaging, that they have had a part of it, that it feels authentic to them, they're just not going to use it. And then you're going to get that inconsistency out in the market, which is what we don't want. So it makes a lot of sense. So Ajit, tell me, if you could get in a time machine and go back in time to when you were starting out in your product marketing career, what advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Emma. I mean, I've been thinking about this a little bit lately. There is many common marketing dogmas, and one of the dogma is the dogma of a T-shaped marketer. And the idea is that you get really good at one discipline, right? And since we are all competitive, like I definitely am, I like to really master a field, right? So I wanted to master product marketing 7 to 8 years ago, and I felt like I did. But I think the what I've missed is developing a more holistic cross company view, right? Like developing a partnership with the CFO, being more metrics oriented, having done more demand gen programs. So I do feel Had I been able to talk to myself 8 years ago, I would say, don't just focus on your day job. Make sure you're talking to the CFO, make sure you're talking to the CEO, make sure you have multiple cross-functional relationships, and not just that, try to expand to the endpoint that you want to reach. So if you want to be CMO, then make sure you are building diverse, broader skill sets in growth and demand gen functions as well. So that's the only, that's the only feedback I'd give myself.
No, that's really good feedback. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers would find that nice, because I think there is pressure to be an ultra specialist, like
Yeah.
be the best at one thing. And I think that whole generalist idea is less popular. I don't know, it comes in waves, but I think it's a really nice thing to hear from someone like yourself who's come so far in product marketing that, hey, get a wider view, try some different things. It's only going to make you better at your role.
Yep. Yep.
So one more question I wanted to throw in, and that was, I like to talk, whenever I talk with product marketers, I like to ask them if there is a word or a phrase that they would happily banish from product marketing for good. And it's just really funny, the answers that people have. I wondered if there's any certain words or phrases that irk you or you wish people would stop using.
Um, I mean, I think there is a class of discussions that I tend to keep having around all of packaging, pricing, positioning, which kind of goes like, this is what this is our name. You'll have a product launch and we'll call it something. Look at all the names that Amazon has for its products, right? I get irked by those because they don't mean anything for customers. So many times you'll have these names like Wizard of Oz, whatever the project name is. I'm like, what does this even mean? And then the arguments around pricing is, well, it takes us 10 hours to build this, so we will price it higher. It doesn't take us a lot of time to build this, so we'll price it lower. Right? These are the conversations I have every day. And I don't want to be impatient, but I think that's the thing is like, we are all working with a internal product focus lens. And it's a conversation I have again and again, is like, let's talk about the customer. Just tell me what we are doing for the customer, right? So there's not a word, but there is just a class of interactions and behavior that is replicated across companies that is a little bit navel gazing, I would say.
I was just going to say navel gazing. That was
Yeah.
the phrase that came into my mind.
Yeah.
Spending too much time navel gazing and getting caught up in funny names and how we talk about this fancy feature or this technology, when really that time is better spent listening to customers and trying to get closer to them.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So just before we end here, I know you've got your book coming out, and could you remind me the name of the book again?
Yeah, the book is called Price to Scale. If you want to sign up for a discount, please go to ajitghuman.com/pricing-book, or just connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to keep you in the loop.
Yeah, that sounds like a really helpful resource for product marketers. So way to go with your pandemic projects. I'm really proud of
Thank you. Thanks,
you.
Emma.